In this video lesson, we're going to be taking a look at a few more of the options in the Quantize menu for Pro Tools, specifically Offset Grid By, Randomize, and Strength. So just to get started, let's go ahead and select all these notes, and with no options selected, just quantize them. There we go. Quantize right to the grid, which is measure 2. Let's go with grid mode there. Measure 2, beat 1, tick 0. All right, let's undo that. And now let's see what we get when we use some of these options. And let's start with Offset Grid By. Let's say that we've got a virtual instrument on this track that has some latency in it. By latency, I mean that the sound coming from that virtual instrument is lagging behind the rest of our track. If we use offset grid in a certain way, what we can do is we can quantize those notes so they're tightened up, yet we can have them, or we can offset the grid so that they will quantize or snap to a grid that is earlier than the actual grid point that we see in Pro Tools. So I'm going to go here and offset my grid early by negative ticks. So negative 10 ticks will actually put an invisible grid 10 ticks earlier than the normal grid, which would be measure 2, beat 1. Okay? Snap, get those again, apply, and now you can see all those notes are located at measure 1, beat 4, 950. Remember, there's 960 ticks in every measure, so it's 10 ticks early into there. It's shifted 10 ticks into the previous beat. So 960 ticks per beat. I'm sorry, beat, not per measure. Okay? So 960 ticks per beat, and right now we've shifted those 10 ticks early into the previous beat. Okay? So that might be one way you could overcome a latency problem in your DAW with certain virtual instruments. Let's undo that. Deselect that. Let's select randomize. Okay? Randomize is a little bit tricky, but let's go ahead and deselect it, quantize those to real tight quantization right to the grid. Let's say that I've been working on this track for a while and it just sounds a little bit stiff and too, as they say, MIDI. Now, if you think about when you've played a keyboard and maybe you've been pounding away on a C chord or a D chord or an F chord or whatever chord it is, 3 or 4 notes, when you play, all the notes don't come down at the same time. It actually may, when you play the notes, they actually may look or be recorded something like that. What we want to do is, if I've already quantized the notes and I say, geez, they sound too over-quantized or too stiff, I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and deselect randomize, apply that. And now what I'm going to do is essentially unquantize them, all right? So here it works by a percentage. Right now my grid is quarter note. A quarter note has 960, let me clear that. Each quarter note is 960 ticks. In our previous video lesson on quantization, we found out that when we have quarter note grid selected, there's a decision point halfway between each quarter note, and that is halfway between, so halfway, or 960 divided by 2, is 480. So that means I can randomize these. If I randomize them by 100%, it would distribute these notes either 480 ticks early or 480 ticks late around this main quantization point, which is measure 2, beat 1. Okay? So let's go ahead here, select those notes, and I'm going to put in 10% quantization or randomize, which means, there we go, 10% of 480 is 48. So that's 48 ticks, and that means 48 ticks early or late. Actually, it's a total of 48 ticks distributed either early or late, so that would mean 48 divided by 2. So that would mean some of the notes will be distributed between between the grid and 24 ticks early, and between the grid and 24 ticks late. So let's go ahead and apply this. And you can see that's how it distributed these notes. Let's undo it and randomize it again. And that was the distribution this time. Undo it, randomize it again. That's the distribution this time. So you can just keep redoing it until you get what you like. You can actually lower the randomization value to maybe something maybe like 3% and just get them off the grid just a little bit. And if we zoom out, you can see those notes still actually look fairly tight, and it may add that human feel that we're just looking for. So let's go ahead and turn off randomize, and there we go, and that's back to where we started. All right, now let's try strength. Here, when we quantize and I don't have anything selected, the strength is automatically at 100%. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, and let's find a note right here. Oops, just that note right there. And let's move this note a little bit. I'm going to go into slip mode. There we go. And now you can see the location of this note is measure 2, beat 1, tick 10. Measure 2, beat 1, tick 10 is the start of that note, and that's where my cursor is located. So what I'd like is located, so that's why the counter updates. What I'd like to do is I'd like to only quantize this note by 50% strength. So when I quantize it, it's only going to move halfway to the grid, not all the way to the grid. So let's go ahead and change that to, let's just type it in, that'll be easier. 50%. Okay. Apply. And you can see now that note has moved to the left or closer to the grid by 5 ticks, 50% of the way, to measure 2, beat 1, tick 0, 0, 5. So experimenting with the strength, just again to loosen up your track so you're not over quantizing. Let's say that you've played the track and it's got a good feel to it, and you just want to tighten it up a little bit. Using the strength feature can really be a great thing to experiment with. So we'll continue on with include within, exclude within, and swing to finish up with quantize in the next lesson.